The George Floyd trial is set to begin very soon. The NBA ratings have hit an all-time low, and a woke pastor says that Jesus used a racial slur. Yeah, you heard that correct. I'm William Hall, and this is The William Hall Show. All right, so there is a lot to unpack today. First of all, the stimulus bill. The stimulus bill has now been passed in the Senate. Okay, so now all that needs to really take place is that Biden is looking at signing the package at this point. So, at least as far as the Senate is concerned, not one Republican crossed the line or the aisle to vote in passing the final version of the legislation, as several of them lamented that they were not welcome to the negotiating table and had no say in the massive package. Of course, what they're saying is absolutely correct. The Democrats, as far as the stimulus was concerned, had no reason to do anything because they have enough of a, or at least not necessarily a majority, but if there was a tie, they had Kamala Harris to break the tie anyways. So they could basically pass anything they wanted, no matter what. It didn't really matter. But now you're going to see that the direct checks of $1,400 will be going out very soon. Probably next week is what they're looking at right now. So Biden just needs to sign it, which of course there's no real reason as to why he would not sign it. And he's looking at doing that on Friday this week. So getting into a separate story, the George Floyd trial is set to begin very soon. Now, the media has lied about George Floyd. Everything that's happened in that situation was a pretty big lie. And the issue is that it took us too long to figure out what took place. So, first of all, if you recall, this was all last summer. This was everything was going crazy over the whole BLM movement and all of that. So we had a video that became available to us that was, I think it was like 8 minutes and 46 or whatever seconds it was. And it was showing this guy on the ground, police officer. The police officer had a knee on his neck, and everybody was saying that this was police brutality. That's exactly what we saw here. Well, the issue is that that video that we saw, the video that everybody was so outraged about, was literally cut by the media to only show you a portion of what they wanted you to see. We then had to wait, I think it was maybe a month or two before we got the full video, what basically what happened in the lead up to that, and then what happened after everything. And in the lead up, when we had the full context, we were able to see all of the information. Namely, that George Floyd stated several times that he could not breathe well before he was ever moved to the ground. We also saw that he was the one that actually requested to be put on the ground. They had him in a police car with the air conditioning and everything like that. And George Floyd was the one that was actually saying, I can't breathe, get me out of here, get me out of here. I mean, the police officers were like, hey, the car has air conditioning, like that you would probably be more comfortable in the vehicle, but he did not comply. He didn't want to do that. So they put him and actually moved him on the ground. That's actually what took place. The other thing too is that Floyd, after the fact, after we were able to get the toxicology report, we're able to see that he had a ton of drugs in his system. And when we're talking about a lot of drugs, there's people that have done drugs. But what we're talking about is enough drugs in his system that he would have died regardless of what took place that day. That's how many drugs he actually had in his system. So the biggest one was the fentanyl that he had. He actually had 3 times the lethal dose of fentanyl. Now, a lot of medical examiners have looked at this that are familiar with this drug and the dosage and all of that and have said, if this was under any other circumstance, no matter what took place, this guy would have died from this regardless. Like, there was nothing that pretty much could have been done. Like, unless they basically had him in a hospital right after he took these drugs. Like, but he was going to die anyways. And that plays a very important part in all of this, of course. So the details do in fact matter. So before I get into exactly what the defense is going to be in this, the real thing to understand is that the media lies about a lot of these racist events or these racial events. And they say that they're racist, even if they are or maybe they're not. And in this situation, I don't think that it was at all. if you're actually looking at what took place and looking at the video in the lead up to what we saw take place, there really isn't anything that we can point to and say that this is specifically racist. But the media wanted it to be the case so badly. I mean, they really wanted it to be the case. Think about that. There's hardly any context for them that's enough for the media to change their mind on it. They're regardless of what takes place, they're going to try and craft their narrative out of it. For example, just a few of the examples that I kind of wrote down here. Have the media ever told you that you are more likely to be shot by a cop if you were actually white? That's a fact, okay? Statistically, it's on the FBI statistics. You can actually look all of this up on the FBI yearly kind of homicides and different police shootings and all that. It's all listed there. Public information. There's a higher percentage of minority police officers than the general population. So in other words, I think blacks make up about 13 to 15% of the population. There's more than that on pretty much most police forces. On average, more than that by far. And yet, apparently, cops are racist. How does that make sense? The cop that is more likely to use force against a minority perpetrator is a minority officer. Okay? Keep that in mind there. What we're saying is that if there's a black police officer, he's more likely to use force against a black perpetrator than a white person, because the white person is probably worried about being or turning out like some of these other victims that are getting charged for the stuff like Derek Chauvin is now in this George Floyd trial. Now, the other thing, too, is that 10% or 10 times black on white crime than white on black crime. People don't want to talk about that. Number one cause of death for black men under the age of 44 is homicide. And the last thing here is that an officer is 18 times more likely to be shot by a black person than vice versa. The media doesn't want you to know these statistics at all. They would rather lie to you than tell you what you need to know. And that's why it made me so upset last year when so many people were going out and putting black squares. And I get it that many of them meant well, but they didn't know the facts, and that cost them and basically made them look really crazy by putting this thing up there without fully understanding exactly what it was. So the defense that that they're going to be looking at arguing is that the Minneapolis police manual trains officers to use the neck restraint that Chauvin used on George Floyd. So first of all, literally it is in the training manual. That is in there. So the point is that why would you basically charge the officer when in fact it was the police training that has that listed as something in there in the first place? The second thing that they're looking at using as a defense is that George Floyd died of the fentanyl overdose after the medical examiner determined Floyd had a fatal level of fentanyl in the system at the time of death, which of course he did. Like I said, the other medical examiners have come out and said, multiple of them have said, look, this guy basically had 3 times what would already guarantee kill somebody. So he was already basically wishing for a death sentence at that point. He was already going to die. So how can you at the same time kind of charge this guy besides the fact that you just have society telling you something else, that they'd rather lie? They don't want you to know that that was the case. George Floyd was no saint. That doesn't mean that he deserved to die or any of these things like that. But the point is that when you're looking at these criminals, these people that are doing this, taking these ridiculous amounts of illegal drugs that have a horrible past with a lot of these things, oftentimes you're going to see that they're going to end up in these situations that are going to cause them to possibly get hurt, whether they're hurting themselves or whether that's from an act from a police officer inadvertently. And that's the issue here, is that how can you possibly charge the police officer with some first degree or second degree murder when it's the stuff that the method he was using was in the training manual? When the guy asked to be put on the ground, if George Floyd had never said, I can't breathe in the car, and he wasn't the one that specifically requested to be put on the ground, this wouldn't be a trial. Everything that happened to George Floyd was because he requested for it to happen or took the drugs that caused most likely his death. So that's what we're dealing with right now. I'll definitely keep you updated on that. Right now, they have, I believe they just completed the jury selection. Obviously, they're not going to tell you exactly who those people are. But either way that this actual verdict kind of ends up at, it won't satisfy any of the BLM people. There's going to be rioting. There's going to be looting. There's going to be the same thing, because no outcome is ever going to basically make people feel good about it unless they just give them a straight death sentence, which is not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. So the NBA just did their all-star kind of TV program, and the ratings hit an all-time low. Now, this kind of stuff is pretty interesting because to me, it just really showcases that people are not interested in the woke kind of framework that sports has kind of gone down over the last, I would say, maybe 2 years. So the ratings for the NBA All-Star game on Sunday night, which included a dunk contest, was down 24% from last year. So there were a total of, it's a little bit less than 6 million viewers, basically. So obviously that sounds like a lot, 6 million, but that's actually very, very low for a public TV program. To give you an example, if any of you have followed the royal family and Meghan Markle, that program where they were doing the interview on Sunday with Oprah Winfrey actually got 17.8 million. Okay. So these are very, very, very bad ratings. These are the lowest ratings that they've ever had. I mean, 24% loss over the past year. More people are home than ever. So there's no excuse to say that people are just working so much these days. It's pretty bad. The truth is that Americans are fed up with politics and sports. Some people just want to watch sports, and that's it. They don't want to see all of the woke things. I still remember when the NBA, all of that, had plastered BLM all over the stadium. Some of them still do. I still remember when they put the victims of these different BLM victims or whatever on the backs of their helmets, when they had peace and liberty and all these weird like terminologies and things on the backs of their jerseys, expecting people to apparently watch the game and just know who guy number 3 is. It didn't make any sense to begin with. And these things and these trends are going to continue until they realize that, hey, you're only alienating half of your fan base, that people just aren't going to tune in anymore. Like they don't need to watch sports necessarily. It's not some thing that they have to always be tuned into. So if they don't like the experience of watching it because of the things that they're seeing on there, they're just going to turn it off. Plain and simple. That's all that's going to happen. And the ratings will continue to go down year after year. A musician had to recently issue an apology because they read a book. Just a book. Not really a controversial book when I kind of explain what that is, but just a book. Now, this actually is coming from the popular kind of bluegrass band called Mumford and Sons. The name of the person in the band is Winston Marshall. They play the banjo and lead guitar for the band. And the musician tweeted an endorsement of journalist Andy Ngo's Antifa expose. And it's titled Unmasked, Inside Antifa's Radical Plan to Destroy Democracy. The tweet addressed to Ngo said, "Finally had the time to read your important book. You're a brave man." That's it. That's it. That's enough to basically set the cancel culture thing right on this guy, okay? Now, Andy Ngo is a freelance journalist. He covers a lot of the Antifa things, the BLM riots that happened last year, and basically just does the on-the-ground reporting. It's not possible for this guy to lie because everything that he is dealing with is firsthand experience. He's on the ground, oftentimes videoing and showing what is actually happening. So he's just writing a book with a collection of the things that he's seen that can be backed up by video, and all of a sudden, that's off the limits. You can't do that. So they were obviously labeling Marshall as a racist, calling him to be fired. Every name in the book you can imagine, of course, is kind of just the run-of-the-mill stuff that cancel culture typically does. But they made it clear that there is essentially no difference between reading something like Andy Ngo's book and Hitler's book, Mein Kampf. No difference. That apparently if you read it, that means you must agree with it in every way possible. There's no way, of course, to read something for educational purposes. I don't understand how that makes sense. I really don't get it. It's just a book. But this is not the first time, apparently, that he has been under, or the band in general has been the subject to some type of cancel culture. So back in 2018, the band invited Jordan Peterson. And after pictures of Peterson and members of the band appeared on social media, Marshall told a Canadian radio station, "I don't think that having a photograph with someone means that you agree with everything they say." Which is common sense. It's actually crazy that you have to put that out there in the first place. Just because you take a picture with a guy doesn't mean that all of a sudden you agree with every single word that he's ever said ever possible. But that's the way that the cancel culture likes to do this. In every single situation, they want to make sure that no matter what it is that you don't not only associate, but that you don't quote tweet, you can only hate them in every way possible. You can't even pretend to just know who they are or acknowledge anything. Don't read their stuff. Don't talk about it. Just stay as far away from these people that we as the radical left don't like. So after he deleted the offending tweet, then apparently deleting all the other tweets, he continued with an apology about what basically took place. So he said, quote, "Over the past few days, I have come to understand the pain caused by the book I endorsed. I have offended not only a lot of people I don't know, but also those closest to me, including my bandmates, and for that I am truly sorry. As a result of my actions, I am taking time away from the band to examine my blind spots. For now, please know that I realize how my endorsements have the potential to be viewed as approvals of hateful, divisive behavior. I apologize, as this is not at all my intention." Why is he coming out and apologizing for this in the first place? I mean, looking at what he's saying, who is in pain because of this book? I mean, really, like I said, this is Andy Ngo. He's just a journalist. He's not an opinion writer. He's not a political pundit. He's not a political commentator. He's literally just a journalist that goes on the ground to these places and just literally documents what he sees. Think about that. He's a real objective journalist. And by the way, Andy Ngo is not a conservative. He is not a Republican. He doesn't even really come out and say anything about which political side he's on. He's just documenting what's actually out there. And all of a sudden, people have a problem with that. You can't even read the book. That's what doesn't make sense about this. And in addition to this, you know what this apology is going to do? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Actually, it's worse to apologize to the cancel culture mob because all they do is just assume the worst. It doesn't matter what you do. It's actually just their way of basically trying to get you to submit just so they can even blame you even more. That's all they do. It's, "Oh, you offended us. How dare you do that? Please apologize." And then you say, "Well, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to do that." And they're like, "It's not good enough. You must now denounce them on Twitter by saying all of these things that we have to deem necessary. Oh, that denouncement wasn't good enough. Please do this other thing and then do this other thing." Before you know it, they're controlling you. They're basically telling you everything you need to do because you're too scared and you bent the knee to them and apologize. So it's never a good idea. The fact is that the musician here and the band, they're not going to be the first. This is not the first person that has been canceled by this type of stuff, but they're also not going to be the last as well. So just a quick reminder, I do have a Patreon where you can donate directly to the show, and I also have a YouTube channel that you can subscribe to as well. If you are listening to this on Apple Podcasts or any of the other podcast networks, please make sure you leave a review as it does help the show out. A Christian student was barred from speaking and preaching on a college campus, and his case against the school actually went all the way up to the Supreme Court, and they just ruled in his favor, which is very, very good news. So this is a former student at the Georgia College, and he was prohibited from preaching on campus, and he was looking to seek compensation. And the U.S. Supreme Court, like I said, ruled this past Monday in his favor. So he was actually restricted in 2016 by school officials from preaching and handing out literature at an outdoor plaza in the public college's campus. He was told that student free speech exercises were restricted to 2 areas of the college's campus. Now, okay, we're like seeing this and, at first it seems fairly reasonable, but the truth is that from what I've seen at other college campuses, as long as the narrative of what they kind of believe in, this kind of any of the woke things or any of the left-wing events or whatever it may be, as long as they're doing their thing, they can pretty much get away with anything. They can flip your tables over. They can basically do whatever they want. But the second that it's a Christian speaker, all of a sudden, there's all of these rules. So he later reserved a designated free speech zone so he could distribute religious literature and speak about his beliefs. But he was approached by campus police and asked to stop because the police had received some calls about his preaching. The student was informed that the free speech zone was not reserved for open air speaking, and he was in violation of the student code of conduct, which is ridiculous. There should be no reason as to why even if you're going to have different zones, why somebody can't go there and just literally speak about the Bible, to preach whatever they want to do. It is free speech. And in all places, we need free speech on college campuses. But we've seen over and over again that they a lot of the colleges, regardless of whether it's the student mobs that kind of go against some of the different speakers that they want there. If it's Ben Shapiro, they won't let him speak there. If it's someone else, they don't want them speaking there. That's the way that they're going to behave in all of these situations. And Trump actually put out this was a while ago, but he pretty much put in an order that would make it so that if any schools didn't allow or denied speakers from coming to their campus solely based off of the offensive mob kind of coming up and trying to stop it from happening, that they will lose all of their, a lot of the funding that they were going to get normally. So things like this, it is a good thing that the Supreme Court ruled in his favor. But I don't think this is the last time that we're going to see situations like this where people just cannot talk about Christianity on a college campus. It just goes to show that free speech isn't just about politics. It's oftentimes about Christianity as well. So in a big flip here, there's a woke pastor, okay? This guy put out a video on TikTok of all places. That ought to tell you everything you need to know right there. But he puts out this video, and he's saying that Jesus used a racial slur in the Bible. Okay, so honestly, I can't even explain this, so just check this video out.
Did you know that there's a part of the Gospel of Mark where Jesus uses a racial slur? In Mark chapter 7, there's the account of the Syrophoenician woman, a woman who is Syrian and Greek, both of which there were strong biases against within the Jewish community. And she comes to ask Jesus to heal her daughter who's possessed by a demon. And what is Jesus' response? He says, "It's not good for me to give the children's food," meaning the children of Israel's food, "to dogs." He calls her a dog. What's amazing about this account is that the woman doesn't back down. She speaks truth to power. She confronts Jesus and says, "Well, you can think that about me, but even dogs deserve the crumbs from the table." Her boldness and bravery to speak truth to power actually changes Jesus' mind. Jesus repents of his racism and extends healing to this woman's daughter. I love this story because it's a reminder that Jesus is human. He had prejudices and bias, and when confronted with it, he was willing to do his work. And this woman was willing to stand up and speak truth.
That is the dumbest thing I've seen all week. just being honest with you. So this guy's clearly not a Christian. At least, I mean, he's claiming to be one, but he's not really a Christian. Let's be serious here. So first of all, this guy's name is Brandon Robertson, and he's been on Twitter saying these kind of crazy things, but really he's just one of these woke Christians. And a lot of people think that these people actually aren't all that common, but they're more common than I think you realize, because a lot of this is turning into the mainstream kind of Christianity, this easy to go along with Christianity. And I hope that through this video, we can kind of see how these people have a very warped sense of what Christ, of who Christ is, of what the Word of God is. It's very wrong. It's just totally incorrect. So he talks about this woman not backing down and instead speaking truth to power, and that she changed his mind and that Jesus repents of his racism. First of all, let's be real here. This guy that is talking about all this stuff, he's gay, okay? He's gay, and he has his pronouns listed in his Twitter bio, which is enough right there. But if you believe that Jesus was ever racist or had to repent of anything, that means that Jesus would have sinned. And Christianity 101 keeps that from being able to be a thing, because Christianity 101 is that Jesus did not sin. Therefore, if you believe that he did sin, you are not a Christian, okay? You're not. I don't care how you want to spin it. I don't care what you want to insert into it or what your feelings are about it. If you feel that Jesus did not, or if you think that Jesus sinned, you are not a Christian. You are in a completely different type of religion, and it is heresy, and it has nothing to do with what is actually going on. But these people are literally parading around as Christians, apparently. First of all, how is a dog racial? How is that a racial term? That makes no sense at all. First of all, Jesus was referring to a household dog, not literally something as a term to be demeaning in any way. And what he's also talking about is that he's saying, I came to bring the gospel to the Jewish people first. And basically saying that he wouldn't, that it wouldn't be right to reject giving the gospel to them so that I can give it to you instead. Or at least as of right now. The idea is that, yes, it is harsh, but it is not racist. It is not racist. That doesn't make any sense at all. She showed great faith, okay, in her statement and response to Jesus. Keep in mind, though, when I say faith, I'm saying not the way that these woke Christians will talk about faith, because to them, faith is a confidence in yourself. Keep that in mind. There are so many distinctive things that make woke Christianity just simply not Christianity at all. They look at faith as a confidence in themselves. Look at what this guy was saying here. In the video, he's saying that she spoke truth to power, that she didn't back down. That's what he is looking at as being the pinnacles, the good stuff about what is happening here. But that's not even what it is at all. He's literally looking at this in the entire wrong way, because a Christian faith is understanding that you have no faith in yourself, that your faith is in Christ Jesus alone, not in you. So if you truly are a Christian and your faith is in Jesus, there is no way that you can be speaking or doing this thing where you're not backing down. You are backing down. You are by nature surrendering to Jesus Christ. Listen to what is happening here. When he says she spoke truth to power, the truth that she spoke was that Jesus is a holy God and that she is a sinner. That's the truth that she spoke. But the way that he's referring to it as if it's some left-wing ideology kind of measure where they're looking at speaking to government officials or something. That's not what's happening here. She is surrendering to God in this moment. This guy's mistaking faith for personal strength. That is something that a lot of these people are doing these days. And it is not Christianity. It just simply isn't anything. God does not owe us anything. Jesus was laying down a framework, still completed the miracle, still did what she asked for him to do, but he was just explaining what it was. He never said, I'm not going to save you. I'm not going to bring this gospel to you ever. It's just right now, this is what I'm doing. And I'd rather not neglect what I came here to do that for you right now, but I will do that later. Hence, when God says that we will have a seat at the table when we go to heaven. But the point is that this guy doesn't understand that. They have no concept of what is really going on in the Bible, and therefore will say just about anything. They look at the Bible based over their own feelings. They will mold and change this text. I saw this guy on Twitter that basically said, I'm a progressive Christian. There's no way to be a progressive Christian because the word of God doesn't progress. It is unchanged. It has been the same for all of these years. It will continue to be the same. If you are changing it, if you are trying to adapt it and mold it to your needs, to your feelings, you are not a Christian. You can tell yourself that all day. You can call yourself that all day, but that is not what you are. Everything about Christianity is contrary to what the left would like to believe in everything that they do. Because you're talking about a book that is considered as objective truth, that is objective truth, that does not change or mold itself at all. The left hates stuff like that because everything that they do in progressivism is moving and changing things. They can't stand that. The whole idea of something being immovable and always the same and planted in the same way that it's been for thousands and thousands of years is contrary to everything that a Democrat or left-wing person would believe in. And that is why you see these people coming out this way and just literally not understanding anything about the Bible. They're completely misinterpreting it. And people need to see this and understand that these progressive Christians, a lot of these younger Christians that are coming in, that are going to some of these churches, that are learning stuff like this, this is not what they should be learning. But yet they are. And it's going to take people coming out and saying what's happening for them to really understand what it is. That's the only way things are ever going to change. So kind of in a related story, Jordan Peterson, many of you know who that is. Very, very smart guy. I've watched a lot of his videos, really respected the guy for several years. And he's come out in a video now saying that he basically is believing in Jesus.
But the thing is the deeper you go into biology, the more it shades into something that appears to be religious, because you start analyzing the fundamental structure of the psyche itself. And it becomes something, well, becomes something with a power that transcends your ability to resist it. So you can think about Christ from a psychological perspective, and my critic, this particular critic that I've been reading, said, well, that doesn't differentiate Christ much from a whole sequence of dying and resurrecting mythological gods. And of course, people have made that claim in comparative religion. Joseph Campbell did that, and Jung to a lesser degree, I would say, but Campbell did that. But the difference, and C.S. Lewis pointed this out as well, the difference between those mythological gods and Christ was that there's a historical representation of his existence as well. Now, you can debate whether or not that's genuine. You can debate about whether or not he actually lived and whether there's credible objective evidence for that, but it doesn't matter in some sense because it does, but there's a sense in which it doesn't matter because there's still a historical story. And so what you have in the figure of Christ is an actual person who actually lived plus a myth. And in some sense, Christ is the union of those two things. The problem is I probably believe that, but I don't know. I'm amazed at my own belief and I don't understand it. Because I've seen sometimes the objective world and the narrative world touch. That's Jungian synchronicity. Yeah. And I've seen that many times in my own life. And so in some sense, I believe it's undeniable. We have a narrative sense of the world. For me, that's been the world of morality. That's the world that tells us how to act. It's real. We treat it like it's real. It's not the objective world. But the narrative and the objective world touch. And the ultimate example of that, in principle, is supposed to be Christ. But I don't know that seems to me oddly plausible.
Yeah.
But I still don't know what to make of it. Partly because it's too terrifying a reality to fully believe. I don't even know what would happen to you if you fully believed it.
If you believed in the story of Christ, or if you believed that history and let's say the narrative meet,
both, I think you, because when you believe that, you buy both those stories. You believe that the narrative and the objective can actually touch.
So first of all, this is really cool. It really is, because, the fact is that I like Jordan Peterson a lot. He's a really smart guy. He's talked a lot about, different things philosophically in life and being better men and just so many different topics. And he's been an inspiration for so many people. But if many of you may or may not know that he kind of had to get out of the public eye because he was dealing with some serious anti-anxiety medication addiction. And it was inadvertent. He didn't realize what was going on until it was basically too late. And the withdrawal from it was so heavy on his body that his daughter said in a podcast, his first podcast, kind of coming back into everything, that he nearly died several times. I mean, we're talking, they got second opinion, third opinion, fourth opinion, fifth opinion, sixth opinion. I mean, they were traveling all over the world to find anybody that could figure out how to basically get him off this drug without killing him in the process. That's how crazy this situation was. And they actually had to go to Russia to figure this out. And of course, he was taking these anti-anxiety medications because his wife also had been diagnosed with cancer as well. So, I mean, just a really tough situation to deal with. And I always thought to myself, how can somebody go through something like that without Jesus? And I just thought to myself, he would have so much of a better life if he truly believed in Jesus and truly understood that, because that's the only way that he's going to be able to really move forward after this. How are you going to sustain yourself, And after hearing what he went through and everything like that, it's really cool to see this clip where he's talking about this. Of course, he's doing that in his normal philosophical manner. It doesn't mean that he is a born-again Christian right now or anything. But what it does mean is that he's willing to accept these and think about things and change his mind and see what's going on and adapt to what's actually happening in the world and actually read up on it. So I hope that, he continues his exploration and reads the Bible, goes through that, and really gets an understanding of what is happening, and that hopefully God talks to him and tells him, it shows him the better life that he can have through Jesus Christ. So with that being said, I'm going to be praying for him. I hope you are too, just as a guy, that's dealt with so many issues and is finally kind of getting back on his feet. To come out in this video and really emotionally talk about this stuff is really, really awesome to see. So with that being said, I thank you for listening or watching the show, and I will see you next week. You just watched an episode from The William Hall Show. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe.